All right, welcome back. This is going to be lesson number 2 in module 1 of phase 2, I believe. Anyways, we're going to be talking about calories, macros, and we're going to be helping you to find your starting point. Also going over how to progress once you hit plateaus and some fun stuff. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Honestly, if this video gets a little bit long, I might actually save the plateaus for the next lesson because this one could get a little bit long just because of all the details we want to go into it. As always, important to know, in the resource page, I'm going to include a whole breakdown on how to actually track everything and all the details that you need to know that we go over in here. All right, so let's go ahead and start with, again, just an overview. Calories are our overall amount of energy that we burn in a day. So we burn energy as we go throughout our day. Calories are how we measure that energy that we burn. Calories can be broken into 3 macronutrients that we are going to be tracking, which is going to be your protein, your carbs, and your fats. So you have your calories. Let's go ahead and just touch a little bit on what protein, carbs, and fats are. Proteins are going to be your fundamental building blocks for lean tissue, muscle mass, cartilage. It's really kind of the essential for repairing muscle as well, all the lean tissue in your body. And so that's really going to be the things like meats, like fish, beef, chicken, eggs, dairy. Some dairy has obviously protein in it as well. In terms of vegetarian options, you'd have like your legumes, so like beans, chickpeas, lentils. So those are really your proteins. There's a lot of information out there on proteins and all this stuff really. I just want to give like a little touch point on each one. But again, I'll give you a full breakdown in the resource page. It's also important to know that your proteins have 4 calories per gram. All right, so we'll get more into that as we get into tracking, but that's important to know. So the next one would be your carbohydrates, which also is 4 calories per gram. So protein is 4 calories, carbs 4 calories per gram. Carbs, most of you know, that's going to be like your rice, again, your beans, breads, pastas, fruit drinks, candy. So that's your carbs. Lastly is going to be your fats, which is 9 calories per gram. So more than double the amount of calories per gram, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but that's very important to know. And your fats are going to be like your oils, butter, some meats as well. So like, just because something is considered a protein doesn't also mean that it has things like fats in it. So if you think of things like a chicken breast compared to like a filet mignon, those are going to be very different in calories because one has way more fat content, which would be the filet compared to the chicken breast. All right. Those are the main macronutrients and the amount of calories per gram. Let's go ahead and dive into how to actually start tracking these things. So first off, we're going to go over how to set everything up, but I want you to know that at the very beginning, we only want you to track your calories and your protein, all right? I'll get more into this later, but I do want to say that now. I'll probably say it a couple more times because I want to make sure that that gets across to you. Let's go ahead and talk about how to actually find your calorie and protein goal, all right? And a couple tips and tricks that you should know before getting started. So number 1, the most important thing to think about with tracking is accuracy, all right? This is super important because obviously we're tracking for a reason and we're tracking to be more accurate and more diligent and more aware about what we're consuming. So if we want to do that, we need to be accurate as well, all right? Now, there's going to be a lot of figuring things out at the beginning, so you're not going to be perfect, and that's okay, but the more accurate you can be and get over time, the better it'll serve you. And you want to do things in the same way as well. What I mean by that is how you track your foods and stuff, if you can be as similar as possible when you do it, i.e. trying to use the same scales, the same types of measurements, and the way you measure things is also good because like any science project, you want to keep the controllables and stuff as similar as possible. So how to track appropriately. First of all, you need a scale. So you need a food scale. I recommend you get a decent size one. Want anything super small, but you don't need anything really big. You don't need the most expensive, but you don't need the cheapest one either. Here's one example of a food scale. Here's another example. All right, honestly, this one I like a little bit better. I think I got it on Amazon for pretty freaking cheap as well. It's not super huge, but it's also, I think it's like a hand size. but that's pretty reasonable, and you can carry it around, and I think it was like maybe 25 bucks. So first things first, get a decent scale. And the other thing is you want to make sure that you can measure, obviously grams, ounces, all that, which pretty much all of them do, but just always double check. And let's go ahead and talk about just kind of 7 basics for how to make sure that you're actually tracking accurately. All right, let's actually go ahead and get into how to find your calorie and protein goal. So first things first, we are going to use something called caloriecalculator.net. I'll have the link in the resource page, but this is what I always use. You don't necessarily have to use this if you have another resource that you like or that you know of. It's just the one that I do. It's free and it's a good starting point. So when you go on to caloriecalculator.net, it'll pop you up to a certain page, and in that page, if you're not already on there, you want to get to the fitness and health spot. So this is what it looks like. All right. And you want to make sure you got the fitness and health up here. And then once you get there, you want to go to whatever metrics you like to use. I use the US metrics or US units. And once you're there, it's going to ask you for a couple different things. Number 1 is your age. 2 is going to be your gender, male, female. 3 is going to be your height. 4 is going to be your weight. And then this is the piece that you might get some different answers. I'll tell you how I would approach it, is going to be your activity level. Now, I always usually put lightly active. I don't usually say moderate, because here's the deal. The more active you say you are, the more calories it's going to give you. All right. So if you say that you're highly active or even moderately active, you're going to get more calories allocated to your daily budget than if you say lightly or light exercise. So I always just do light, just so that way, again, this is kind of a starting point. Over time, you're going to really kind of learn where your actual kind of numbers should be for maintenance and cutting and building. But this is just, in my experience, a good place to start. So you choose lightly active, whatever weight you are, and then just hit calculate. Once you hit calculate, it's going to spit out a couple numbers. You can see maybe here, it's going to say maintain weight. It'll say mild weight loss, and then extreme weight loss. I say start with maintain or mild weight loss. Because here's the truth. 90% of you, when you're starting out, you're probably eating over a maintenance, or even if you think you're eating less, start with no more than the mild weight loss. Because in my experience, with the kind of wiggle room and you figuring out how to do this, you're probably going to start to lose some weight anyways, especially if you're not already working out and then we add activity to it. Start with that and see kind of where you fall within the next week or so. Make sure that you're actually tracking accurately as possible, because again, if you're just kind of willy-nilly, kind of not very accurate or not taking it serious, then these numbers don't really matter. But if you're actually using, to the best of your ability, start with maintenance or a mild weight loss, all right? And then we'll talk about in a later video how to kind of cut down from there. But now that you have your starting point, this is just a reference starting point, put this into your tracking app. And what we'll do next is figure out what are you going to do for your macros and your calories, or macronutrients, so your proteins and the rest of them, all right? Now that you have your calorie goal, you have your app open that you're going to be using, the next piece is figuring out your macronutrients. So like I said before, you're going to start with a protein and a calorie goal. All right. The reason is the most important thing when it comes to losing weight is going to be the amount of calories that you consume compared to the amount of calories that you burn. So if you eat and you burn about the same amount each day, you're going to stay the same. If you're eating more than what you burn, you're going to start to gain weight. If you burn more than you eat, you're going to start to lose weight, all right? So the most important thing when it comes to whatever your goals are, in this example, we'll talk about weight loss. If you want to lose weight, you need to eat less than you burn on a daily basis, all right? Now, that's the most important thing, which is why we want to focus on your calories. The second most important thing is we want to make sure that you're actually getting a good balance of protein in, so that way you build muscle or at least maintain your lean muscle mass. So you have enough protein in your body to fuel muscle repair, to aid in recovery, and to make sure that you can rebuild those muscle tissues that you break down while exercising. So that's why your proteins are the second most important thing. And so to get your protein goal, my preferred way to do it would be to do 1 gram or 0.8 of a gram multiplied by whatever your lean body mass is. So if you have a body fat scale or you have an in-body scan, choose your total lean body mass. And so for me, if I were to look at my lean body mass, so if we can see here, my weight is 200, body fat is 18, and lean mass is at 163. So last entry that I did, that's what my numbers were. Now, for me, my lean mass is 163. So my protein goal would be 1 times 163. So 163 grams of protein, somewhere in that range, 160, 170, 165, whatever. Or if I wanted to eat a little bit less on the lower end, I would multiply that by 0.8. All right, so for you, if you don't have lean mass, then easy way to do that would just be 1 to 0.8 times your ideal body weight. That would be the thing. So if you're 250 pounds, but you want to be 180, shoot for somewhere between like 150 to 180 grams of protein a day. All right. That's going to be the second best way to do it. And that just keeps it simple. All right, now that you have your calorie and protein goal, those are really pretty much the two main things that you need to start tracking. And you want to make sure you put those in the app. And then when you start logging your food, you're tracking everything and making sure that you're hitting those targets within like 10% or so each day. You want to get as close to those as possible, but you don't want to over obsess about hitting the exact number every day because it's not realistic to hit the exact numbers every day. All right, unless you eat the same exact thing every day, but even then, it's going to be off a little bit. So that's the main things for this video that I wanted to cover. So your main task right now is to go through, figure out your calorie protein goal, put it into the app, make sure you have it functioning properly, and review the resource page, and then take it from there. And then next lesson, we're going to go ahead and talk about a couple tips and tricks to make sure that you're actually tracking appropriately and accurately, and to make sure that you're getting the best out of it, along with what to do when you hit a plateau. All right, we'll see you in the next one.